If you want to eat, get up and get it. The stepmother's voice cuts through the air while the little girl in a wheelchair drags herself, crying, to reach the bread fallen on the floor. But what she didn't know was that the millionaire father was watching everything, and 2 minutes later did something nobody ever forgot. The morning light poured into the kitchen with the softness of a promise, painting the cold marble in shades of gold and making the porcelain cups, lined up with military precision, gleam. The aroma of freshly baked bread, just minutes out of the oven, hung in the air, a silent invitation to a moment of sharing and comfort. In that environment of aseptic perfection, everything looked like a magazine spread, except for the atmosphere, so dense and chilly that the sun's warmth couldn't penetrate it. Sitting on the floor, in a corner where the light seemed afraid to venture, little Clara, only 5 years old, watched the scene in silence. Her large brown eyes followed the steam that danced above the bread, a simple spectacle that filled her chest with a fragile flicker of hope. With the shyness of one asking permission to exist, she stretched her tiny hand toward the table, a faint smile gracing her lips. She didn't want much, just a small piece of that normality, a taste of that warmth that seemed to belong to everyone but her. Caroline, her stepmother, stood by the counter, an elegant and impeccable silhouette. Upon noticing the girl's gesture, her smile, which had seemed sculpted to please, froze. There was a hardness in her gaze that turned beauty into something sharp. "Bread is for those who can walk," she said, her voice low but sharp as a blade, slicing through the morning quiet. With a swift, deliberate movement, she dragged the plate of bread to the edge of the table, far from the child's reach. The sound of porcelain scraping against marble was a scratch across Clara's soul. And then, with a slight push, the bread fell to the floor. The dull thud of the food on the polished tile echoed through the kitchen with the force of a thunderclap. A sound that seemed larger and more terrible than any scream the girl could utter. Clara looked at the bread scattered on the floor, a piece of her childish heart breaking along with it. The tears came, but she swallowed them, silent. She had learned early on that crying only intensified the storm. Slowly, supporting herself on her small, fragile hands, she began to drag herself across the cold floor, each inch a battle against humiliation and the pain in her body. "If you want to eat, get up and get it," Caroline repeated, her voice now devoid of any pretense, distilling a cold, methodical cruelty. She crossed her arms, observing the scene like someone watching an experiment with a distant and inhuman curiosity. Clara continued her slow advance, the smell of bread now mixed with the scent of floor wax, a combination that would forever be etched in her memory as the perfume of sadness. She was just inches from her goal, her body trembling from the effort and contained emotion, when a shadow fell across the kitchen entrance. Caroline didn't notice. She remained focused on the small, crawling figure, savoring her power. What she didn't know, what she couldn't imagine, was that William, her husband and the girl's father, was standing there in the doorway, motionless, silent, his body as rigid as a statue. His eyes, which normally reflected the calm of a successful businessman, were now a contained storm of disbelief, pain, and a rage so deep it seemed to suck all the air from the room. He had seen everything, and the world he had built on the fragile foundation of convenience and denial had just come crashing down. William backed away from the kitchen doorway, a slow, silent step, as if fearing the slightest noise might shatter the fragile barrier separating him from that terrible reality. His heart, which had so often remained steady through the fluctuations of the stock market and the pressures of managing a considerable fortune, now beat erratically, a drum of panic and guilt. He hid in the dim light of the hallway, his hands trembling, his breath caught in his throat. The image of Clara dragging herself, the sound of the bread on the floor, Caroline's cold voice, It all replayed in his mind in a torturous loop. The marble beneath his feet, once a symbol of success and the solidity of his net worth, now felt like a path of thin ice, fragile and treacherous. He had built an empire, accumulated a capital that guaranteed him comfort and security, but he had failed in the most fundamental of investments, the protection of his own daughter. The grief from the loss of his first wife had left him vulnerable. A man adrift who had clung to Caroline like a life raft. He had believed he was rebuilding a home, offering Clara the mother figure she had been deprived of. What a fool he had been. In the days that followed, the house returned to its rhythm of rehearsed elegance. Dinners were served with the same pomp, the table set with silverware and crystal glasses that reflected the cold light of the chandelier. Caroline floated through the rooms, a polished smile on her face, talking about charity events and the returns on her personal investments. To the outside world, they were the picture of a perfect family, the union of two prominent names, a merger of assets and status. But William now saw the cracks in the facade. He watched the way Clara's shoulders hunched when Caroline entered the room, the way her eyes sought the floor, avoiding any direct contact. He saw the subtle tension in Caroline's jaw when she addressed the girl, an almost imperceptible clenching that belied the sweetness of her words. The silence at the dinner table was not one of peace, but of oppression. The sound of silverware against the plates sounded like gavels striking down sentences. He felt like a stranger in his own home, a spectator to a grim play he himself had helped stage. Guilt consumed him, an emotional liability that devalued his entire fortune. It was during one of those sleepless nights, as he stared at the ceiling of his luxurious bedroom, that the idea took shape. Acting on impulse would be a mistake. Caroline was a master of manipulation, capable of twisting any accusation, of painting him as the paranoid villain, stressed out by business. He needed proof, something irrefutable. The truth needed to be exposed, not just felt. The next morning, he announced his decision over breakfast. "Caroline, I've been thinking about the house's security. With the news reports about break-ins in the neighborhood, I think it's wise to invest in a state-of-the-art camera system. I want to protect you, Clara, all of our assets." She agreed immediately, praising his prudence and his care for the family. Her eyes shone, not with gratitude, but with satisfaction at another status symbol she could display. The installation crew arrived the next day, discreet and efficient. Tiny, almost invisible cameras were placed in strategic points throughout the house. William oversaw it all, his heart heavy. This wasn't a security measure against the outside world, but against the threat living under his own roof. That night, after Caroline and Clara had gone to bed, he locked himself in his office, the sanctuary where he managed his millions. The light from the monitor illuminated his tense face. With a click, he opened the app that gave him access to all the footage, live and recorded. A mosaic of silent, empty rooms appeared on the screen. He navigated to the day's archives, his finger hovering over the playback icon for the playroom. A cold fear ran down his spine. What was he about to discover? Was he truly prepared to see the raw, unvarnished truth without the filters of his own denial? With a deep sigh, he clicked. The computer screen flickered for a moment before revealing the clear image of the playroom. The room, which should have been the happiest place in the house, looked like a cold, silent stage. The vibrant colors of the toys on the shelves contrasted with the small, solitary figure of Clara in the center of the rug. William felt his chest tighten. His daughter was sitting, her body slumped in exhaustion, her eyes fixed on a high shelf well beyond her reach. There sat a rag doll with red yarn hair, her favorite, the last one her mother had given her. Nearby, out of the girl's line of sight but perfectly framed by the camera, was Caroline. She was reading a design magazine, her legs elegantly crossed, with the relaxed posture of someone enjoying a quiet afternoon. The scene, at first, seemed normal, almost banal. But William didn't look away. He knew that venom often hides in normality. "Come on, sweetie," Caroline's voice cooed, syrupy and patient, without her ever looking up from the magazine. "You know you have to try. It's for your own good, to make your little arms strong." Clara let out a low whimper, a sound of pure frustration, and tried again. She pushed up on her hands, propelling her body forward, her arms stretched to their limit, her fingers wiggling in the air, inches from the shelf. The effort made her small body tremble. She couldn't make it. She collapsed back onto the rug, her face hidden in her arms, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. It was then that William saw it. Caroline slowly lowered the magazine, and a subtle, almost imperceptible smile curved her lips. It wasn't a smile of encouragement. It was a smile of satisfaction, of power, a cruel, silent delight in the child's suffering. In that instant, something inside William broke. The denial, the shield he had so carefully constructed, shattered into 1,000 pieces. That smile was the proof. The truth, naked and hideous, was staring back at him through the screen. He felt a wave of nausea. The air in his luxury office, where he closed million-dollar deals and managed his growing portfolio, suddenly became thin, suffocating. All his money, his fortune, his investments in stocks and cryptocurrencies, it all seemed like dust, insignificant in the face of that scene. He was a billionaire in dollars, but a pauper in the protection of his own child. He kept watching, mesmerized by the horror. He saw Maria, the housekeeper, enter the room to collect a tray. She cast a quick, troubled glance at Clara, then at Caroline. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she left in a hurry, as if the scene burned her. William understood the fear in the woman's eyes. Caroline wasn't just cruel. She was intimidating. The video continued for over an hour of attempts and failures, of muffled crying and the calm, torturous presence of Caroline. When the stepmother finally stood up, put away her magazine, and retrieved the doll, handing it to Clara with a theatrical sigh of, "See, with a little effort, you can do it." William felt no relief. He felt a cold, sharp anger settle in his chest. Guilt hit him with the force of a punch. He hadn't just been blind, he had refused to see. He had traded his daughter's happiness for the convenient peace of his marriage. He paused the video on the close-up of Caroline's smiling face. That face he had once found beautiful was now the personification of a calculated monstrosity. He saved the file, naming it with icy precision. Evidence now on. One click. The first step on a journey from which he could no longer retreat. He looked at the list of recordings for the day. There were more, many more. With a heart that had turned to a block of ice, he clicked on the next file. The night dragged on, heavy and oppressive. William couldn't sleep a wink. He remained in his office, the only light coming from the cold glow of the monitor, which displayed a succession of small cruelties. He watched Caroline forget Clara's glass of water on the patio table, forcing the girl to wait, thirsty, until she finished a long phone call. He watched her put away the prettiest colored pencils, saying they were for when she deserved them. They were small, almost invisible acts that left no marks on the body, but carved deep wounds in the soul. Each video was another stab to his conscience. His business acumen, his ability to foresee market trends and multiply his capital, seemed like a sick joke. He was a giant in the financial world, with a net worth many envied, but inside his own home, he was a moral dwarf, blind and powerless. The fortune he had amassed, held in stocks, funds, and even cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, couldn't buy back his daughter's stolen innocence. The next morning, William came down for breakfast a different man. There was a rigidity to his posture, a distant, grim look that did not go unnoticed. He answered Caroline's attempts at conversation with monosyllables, his eyes scanning the room, observing every gesture, every unspoken word. Maria, the housekeeper, served the coffee in silence, as always. She was a middle-aged woman with calloused hands and a kind gaze, who had worked for the family since before Caroline's arrival. She noticed the immediate change in her employer. She saw the way he looked at his wife, not with love or even indifference, but with a kind of cold, analytical assessment. And she saw, for the first time in a long time, a flash of protective pain in his eyes when he looked at Clara. Maria's heart beat faster. For months, she had carried a burden of guilt and fear. She had witnessed the girl's treatment, had tried to intervene with small acts of kindness, but had been harshly reprimanded by Caroline, who had threatened to fire her, reminding her that this job was her only source of income. Later that day, Maria knocked timidly on the door of William's office. He told her to come in. His eyes were red with exhaustion and sorrow. "Mr. Miller, I'm sorry to bother you," she began, her voice trembling, wringing a cleaning cloth in her hands. I have to tell you something." William looked at her, his face a mask of expectation. "I saw, sir. I see what happens to little Clara. I tried, but I was scared. Mrs. Miller said if I interfered, I'd be out on the street." The words tumbled out, a confession held back for too long. Tears streamed down her face. "I can't stand to see it anymore and do nothing. I feel like I'm betraying the memory of your first wife." William stood up, his expression softening with a compassion that surprised even himself. "Maria, you are not to blame. The blame is mine for not seeing." He felt an immense gratitude for this simple, courageous woman. She was risking everything. "But I didn't come empty-handed, sir," she continued, reaching into her apron pocket. From it, she pulled a small flash drive. "She doesn't know, but sometimes I'd leave my phone recording in the kitchen or the living room, just the audio. I didn't know what to do with it, but my heart told me to save it." She held the object out to him. That small plastic device seemed to weigh a ton. William took it, his fingers brushing against hers. "I promise you, Maria, no one will harm you, and justice will be done." She nodded, relieved, and left the office, leaving him alone with this new and terrible Pandora's box. Alone, he looked at the flash drive in his hand. Older evidence, audio files, her voice, without the filter of an image. What else would he discover? With his heart hammering against his ribs, he inserted the flash drive into his computer. The click of the flash drive connecting to the computer sounded like a verdict in the quiet office. William opened the folder and found dozens of small audio files, named only with dates. He chose one at random, from a few months back. The quality was muffled, but the voices were unmistakable. The first was Clara's. A low cry, almost a whimper. "But I'm hungry, Auntie Caroline." Caroline's reply came next, not loud, but laden with a chilling contempt that the recording couldn't hide. "Polite little girls don't get hungry between meals. You're being spoiled. Go to your room and think about your behavior. You'll only have dinner when you learn some discipline." This was followed by the sound of small footsteps retreating and a bedroom door closing. William closed his eyes. The pain, sharp and physical. Discipline. That was the excuse she always used, the word that masked her cruelty. He remembered that day. Caroline had commented casually at dinner that Clara was being a bit rebellious and needed firm boundaries. He had believed her. He had swallowed the lie like a fool, focused on his business, on increasing his cash flow, on securing a financial future for the daughter he was neglecting in the present. He spent the next few hours listening to those fragments of pain. They were subtle humiliations, orders disguised as advice, a constant drip of psychological abuse that eroded the child's self-esteem day after day. There was a recording where Clara excitedly tried to tell her about a drawing she made at school, and Caroline cut her off with, "Not now, Clara. I'm busy with my stock statement. Grown-up matters." In another, Clara asked for help tying her shoes, and her stepmother replied, "If your mother were here, she would help you, but she's not, is she? You need to learn to manage on your own." That mention of his late wife was like a dagger. Caroline was using his grief, the absence, as a weapon against a 5-year-old child. William's rage transformed into something colder, more determined. It was no longer just about protecting Clara. It was about exposing the fraud that was Caroline. The woman who had comforted him in his pain, who had presented herself as a pillar of strength and sophistication, was a monster of vanity and insecurity, whose only goal was to maintain the image of a perfect life. And Clara, with her vulnerability, was a blemish on that flawless picture. In the following days, the tension in the house became almost palpable. William barely spoke to Caroline, his distance a growing chasm between them. She, sensing the shift, initiated a new strategy. She set aside the harshness and put on the mask of the victim. She would approach him at night, her eyes welling with tears, talking about how overwhelmed she felt, how the responsibility of raising a child that wasn't hers was an immense challenge. "I know I've been a little stressed, my love," she whispered one night, her hand on his chest. "It's the pressure, the investments, organizing the charity events. And you've been so distant. I miss you. Sometimes I think you blame me for not being her." She mentioned his late wife's name, and for a fleeting instant, William wavered. Guilt was fertile ground for manipulation. He remembered the woman who had helped him out of the darkness of grief, who had reorganized his life, who had seemed so competent and loving. Was he, after all, the paranoid one? Was the stress from his business, the responsibility of managing an ever-growing portfolio, distorting his perception? Doubt, like a weed, tried to take root in his mind. He wanted to believe her. He wanted it all to be a big misunderstanding, his mistake. It would be so much easier. But the image of Clara dragging herself across the kitchen floor was a powerful antidote to that comfortable lie. He pulled away from her touch, a wall of ice rising between them. The glint in her eyes faltered, frustration replacing the feigned sadness for a split second. It was enough. He knew he was on the right path. The doubt dissipated, leaving behind only the cold, hard certainty of what had to be done. The next morning dawned grey, the leaden sky reflecting the mood of the house. William came downstairs earlier than usual. The silence was profound, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the living room, each second a reminder of lost time. He entered the kitchen and found Clara already at the table, small and quiet in her high chair. There was no food in front of her, just an untouched glass of milk. Her eyes were downcast, fixed on her own hands. William felt his heart sink. The spontaneous joy, the vibrant energy that should belong to a 5-year-old, had been systematically erased from her. He approached, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good morning, Princess. Where's your breakfast?" Clara flinched slightly, as if the direct attention frightened her. "Auntie Caroline said the bread isn't ready yet," she whispered, her voice barely audible. William glanced at the counter. A basket was filled with golden, fragrant bread rolls, just like every morning. The lie was so blatant, so gratuitous, it took his breath away for a moment. He prepared a plate for her himself, cutting a roll into small squares and serving a portion of fruit. He placed the plate in front of her with deliberate care. "You can eat, honey. The bread is perfect." Clara looked from the plate to her father's face, a mix of surprise and fear in her eyes. She picked up a piece of bread hesitantly, as if expecting it to be snatched from her hand at any moment. Just then, Caroline walked into the kitchen, impeccably dressed, her expensive perfume filling the room. She stopped abruptly when she saw the scene. "William? What are you doing?" "I was just about to serve Clara. I was just waiting for the jam to reach the ideal temperature." The excuse was as flimsy as the one about the bread. A muscle jumped in William's jaw, but he kept his voice calm. "Don't worry, dear. I've got it." Caroline's look toward Clara was quick, but laced with venom. A silent warning. The girl immediately stopped chewing, the piece of bread forgotten in her mouth. William observed the interaction, the cruel dynamic playing out right before his eyes. Caroline's tyranny didn't need yelling. It was wielded in glances, in tones of voice, in lies coated with concern. Later that morning, as he was passing through the hallway, he saw something that finally broke the last barrier of his hesitation. The pantry door was ajar. Inside, with her back to the door, was Clara. She was standing in front of a small counter, and with a swift, furtive movement, she took a slice of sandwich bread from a package. Instead of eating it, she folded it carefully and hid it inside a cloth napkin. Then, she glanced around nervously and tucked the small bundle into the pocket of her dress. The image destroyed him. His daughter, who lived in a house where money and abundance overflowed, where the pantry was always full and luxury was the norm, was hiding food. She was saving a piece of bread to eat later, in secret, like a starving prisoner. The gesture revealed a level of fear and deprivation he could never have imagined. This wasn't about discipline, it was about hunger. About a cruelty so profound it had turned the act of eating into an act of transgression. William backed away from the door, his heart in pieces. The wavering was over. The doubt was dead and buried. He no longer wanted to just believe in his daughter. He needed to become the father she deserved, the safe harbor in her storm, and he would do it, whatever the cost, even if it meant tearing down the castle of appearances he himself had helped build. The time for silent observation was over. It was time to act. Back in the safety of his office, William sat down, but not to analyze the stock market or the profitability of his funds. For the first time in years, the cash flow of his companies seemed like a trivial, distant matter. The image of Clara hiding bread was the only stock that mattered, and its value was one of absolute urgency. He knew a direct, private confrontation with Caroline would be useless. She would deny, distort, accuse him. This war had to be fought on a different field, one she valued above all else, the social stage. It was then he saw, on his mahogany desk, the linen envelope with the gold-embossed invitation. It was for the neighborhood's grand annual charity gala, the most anticipated event for the local elite. An event where fortunes were displayed, social alliances were strengthened, and appearances were polished to a high sheen. It was Caroline's natural habitat, the perfect stage for her to shine, to give speeches about family values and the importance of charity. And it would be there, on that very stage, that the truth would be told. The decision crystallized in his mind, cold and unshakable as a diamond. In the days that followed, William moved with surgical precision, like a strategist preparing for the final battle. He acted with a duplicity that surprised him. To Caroline, he appeared calmer, almost resigned, letting her believe her victim act had won him over. He agreed with her choices for the gala, complimented the dress she bought, discussed the guest list. Inside, however, he was a planning machine. He made a series of discreet phone calls, using his vast network of contacts not to close deals, but to assemble a team. He hired a trusted lawyer, a specialist in children's rights, and an image consultant. The plan was risky. Exposing his family's private life went against all his instincts as a private man. But the duty to protect his daughter outweighed the fear of a scandal. He wanted justice, not revenge. And justice, in this case, needed to be public, so Caroline could never rewrite the narrative. One afternoon, he locked himself in his office with his lawyer and, with his guidance, took the most significant step. He began, in absolute secrecy, the process of creating a foundation. The name came to him spontaneously, inspired by something he had seen Clara drawing in recent days. She spent hours in her corner, drawing with a moving concentration. Her drawings were always the same image, in different variations, pieces of bread with little wings, flying through colorful skies. When he asked what they meant, she answered with the pure, painful logic of a child. Therefore, when the bread wants to fly to people who can't get to it, the sentence hit him like a punch. At that very moment, he decided the foundation would be called the Wings of Bread Institute, a project entirely dedicated to supporting children with disabilities and in vulnerable situations, providing not only financial resources but also support and visibility. It would be Clara's legacy, a way to transform her pain into hope for many. The entire profit from one of his most promising investments would be directed as its initial capital. It was a decision that would redefine the purpose of his entire fortune, transforming his net worth from a symbol of personal power into a tool for change. The charity gala now had a new purpose. It wouldn't just be the stage for the revelation, but also the birthplace of a new beginning. The countdown had begun. There were only 3 days left until the night that would change everything. In the days leading up to the gala, Maria became William's eyes and ears inside the house. The housekeeper's initial fear had been replaced by a quiet determination, fueled by the guilt of not having acted sooner and the renewed hope she saw in her employer's eyes. She moved through the rooms with her usual efficiency, but now her attention was heightened. Every word from Caroline, every order disguised as a suggestion, was noted and reported to William in quick, whispered meetings in the hallway or the pantry. The alliance between the multimillionaire and the housekeeper was unlikely but solid, forged in their shared pain for little Clara. Maria helped organize the evidence, cataloging the audio files she had recorded and correlating them with the new footage from the cameras. Fear, however, was still a constant companion. Caroline, with her sharp intuition for any shift in the environment, began to sense something was amiss. She became more vigilant, her gazes at Maria longer and more suspicious. The tensest moment occurred on the eve of the event. William had asked Maria to retrieve the memory card from the hidden camera in the living room, which contained a particularly incriminating recording from the previous afternoon. Maria waited for Caroline to go upstairs for her long bath. With her heart in her throat, she got a small step stool, positioned it under the bookshelf, and with trembling hands tried to reach the tiny device camouflaged among the books. Her fingers were just brushing the card when she heard the sound of footsteps at the top of the stairs. It was Caroline, coming back. Panic froze Maria's blood. There was no time to get down and put the stool away. In a reflex, she shoved the memory card into her apron pocket and grabbed the first book she saw, pretending to be dusting. Caroline entered the room, her hair wrapped in a towel, and stopped. Her eyes narrowed. "Maria, what are you doing up there?" Her voice was casual, but the suspicion was palpable. "Just dusting, Mrs. Miller. This top shelf gets very dusty," Maria replied, trying to keep her voice steady, her heart hammering against her ribs. Caroline stared at her for a long moment, the silence stretching like a rubber band about to snap. For an instant, the plan seemed to be falling apart. If Caroline searched her, if she found the card, all would be lost. William's mind, monitoring the scene from his office via another camera, raced. He needed to create a diversion. Meanwhile, oblivious to the adults, tension. Clara was finding her own refuge. In her room, sitting on the floor, she spread out her drawings. The winged breads now filled dozens of pages. They flew over houses, delivered baskets to other children, and landed on windowsills. They were more than simple drawings. They were the manifestation of her deepest desire, the expression of an empathy that cruelty had failed to erase. She felt the change in the house's air. She noticed the whispers, the tense glances between her father and Maria, Caroline's restrained irritability. She didn't understand what was happening, but her childish instinct picked up on the waves of conflict. That afternoon, as William passed by her room, she called to him, "Daddy, look." She showed him a special drawing. It was a winged bread, larger than the others, and on its back, it carried a little girl with brown hair. "This is the strongest one," she said, with solemn seriousness. "It carries you away from the sadness." William took the drawing, his eyes welling up. That sheet of paper, with its childish lines and vibrant colors, was more valuable to him than any property deed or stock certificate. This was the key, the emotional key that would open every door and justify every risky step he was about to take. He looked at his daughter, at the purity of her heart, and knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that he was doing the right thing. That drawing wasn't just going on his office wall, it was going on the big screen for everyone to see the soul they were trying to crush. The diversion came in the form of a shrill alarm. From his office, William remotely activated the fire alarm in one of the lesser-used wings of the house. The piercing sound cut through the tension in the living room, making Caroline jump. "What is that?" she exclaimed, her suspicion of Maria instantly forgotten and replaced with genuine panic for her precious belongings. "Must be a glitch in the system. I'll check it out," William shouted, emerging from his office and deliberately running in the opposite direction of Caroline, drawing her attention. The maneuver worked. Caroline followed him, worried, leaving Maria the window of opportunity she needed, her heart still pounding. The housekeeper got down from the stool, put it back in its place, and rushed to hand the memory card to William, who took it discreetly while shutting off the faulty alarm. The plan, by a thread, was still intact. The night of the charity gala arrived, wrapping the luxury-gated community in a veil of glamour and expectation. Expensive cars glided silently to the entrance of the ballroom, depositing couples dressed in elegant gowns and sparkling jewelry. The air was thick with perfume, soft piano music, and the clinking of champagne glasses. Caroline was the personification of success and sophistication. She wore a scarlet-red gown that hugged her slender figure, a bold and dramatic choice that drew all eyes. She moved through the room with the confidence of a queen in her court, smiling, greeting guests, accepting compliments on her work with the organizing committee. William was by her side, a silent spectre in his impeccable tuxedo. His face was a mask of calm, but inside, a storm of emotions churned. He watched his wife, the way she played the part of the perfect matriarch, the dedicated philanthropist, and felt a knot of revulsion in his stomach. Every smile of hers was a lie, every word about model families was an affront. He exchanged a quick glance with Maria, who was working the event as part of the catering staff, a discreet presence that gave him strength. The time for speeches arrived. The master of ceremonies took the stage, offered the customary thanks, and with grandiloquent words called up the soul of this event, a woman of heart and fortitude, Mrs. Caroline Miller. Applause echoed through the hall. Caroline stood up, her smile radiant, and walked toward the stage. She held a small card with notes for her speech, a rehearsed text about the importance of protecting the most vulnerable. The cynicism of the situation was almost unbearable. As she reached the foot of the stage steps, William stood up, calmly, but with a firmness that silenced the nearby conversations. He said, "Excuse me, before my wife speaks, I would like to ask for a moment of your time." A murmur of surprise rippled through the audience. Caroline turned to him, her smile frozen, confusion and a flash of irritation in her eyes. "William, darling, what are you doing?" she hissed, low enough for only him to hear. He didn't answer. He just walked toward the audio-visual technician, who had already been briefed. "You can turn on the projector, please." William took the microphone. The silence in the hall was now total, thick, almost physical. No one breathed. The large white screen behind the stage, which had been displaying the event's logo, flickered and went dark. And then the image appeared, sharp, brutal, undeniable. The pristine kitchen, the bread on the floor, and the small figure of his daughter on her knees, dragging herself to reach the food. The image had no sound, but Clara's silent scream of humiliation and pain filled the deafening silence of the hall. The shock in the room was instantaneous and palpable. The collective sound of choked gasps was the only thing that broke the stunned silence. Conversation ceased. Champagne glasses remained suspended midway to lips. Polished smiles melted from faces, replaced by masks of disbelief and horror. On the screen, the cruel scene unfolded in a devastating silence that made it all the more powerful. The image of Clara, so small and vulnerable, crawling across the cold marble for a piece of bread, was a stronger accusation than any words could be. Caroline, at the foot of the stage, was frozen. The color drained from her face, leaving a ghostly pallor that contrasted violently with the vibrant red of her dress. Her wide eyes were fixed on the screen, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing, not out of moral shock, but at the sheer audacity of the exposure. The belle of the ball had just been stripped bare in front of her entire court. William remained standing, microphone in hand, his posture firm, though his heart was beating like a war drum. He let the image speak for itself for a long moment, allowing the horror to sink in, for the truth to be absorbed without filter. Then he raised the microphone to his lips. His voice, when he spoke, was not one of rage, but of a deep and restrained sorrow, which made it even more impactful. "She used to say that bread was only for those who could walk," he said, the words echoing through the silent hall. The pronoun she hung in the air, unmistakable, pointing to the woman in red who now seemed to shrink under the weight of hundreds of stares. He paused, scanning the audience, seeing the bewilderment on the faces of his friends, partners, and neighbors. "But today," he continued, his voice gaining strength, "today I understand that bread isn't for those with strength in their legs. Bread is for those who are hungry. Bread is for those who can feel." The image on the screen changed. The video from the playroom appeared, with Clara crying as she tried to reach the doll, and Caroline's subtle, cruel smile in the background. Then, one of Maria's audio recordings filled the room, Caroline's cold voice denying food to a hungry child. The audience watched, mesmerized. Businessmen who traded millions in assets, women who managed charitable funds, people who prided themselves on their status and moral rectitude, all confronted with the brutality that hid behind a facade of perfection. Caroline, finally snapping out of her stupor, tried to react. "This is absurd. It's edited. William is under a lot of stress. He doesn't know what he's doing," she stammered, trying to walk toward him, but her legs felt weak, betraying her. Her voice, normally so controlled and melodious, was high-pitched and desperate. But no one was listening to her. The evidence was overwhelming, the raw emotion in William's voice undeniable. He cut her off, not with a shout, but with a wave of his hand and one last image. On the screen, Clara's drawings appeared. The breads with wings, flying free and colorful. And finally, the drawing of the large-winged bread carrying the little girl away from the sadness. The simplicity and purity of those images, contrasted with the cruelty they had just witnessed, was the final blow. Silent tears began to stream down the faces of some of the women in the audience. The hypocrisy of this luxurious setting had been laid bare. The night that was supposed to be the pinnacle of Caroline's social triumph had become her public trial, with the image of Clara's drawing still projected on the screen, a symbol of resilience and hope floating above the astonished elite. William took the final step. His voice, now softer but filled with an unshakable conviction, filled the hall. "For a long time, I hid behind my work, behind my grief. I thought that building a solid portfolio was the best way to protect my daughter. I was wrong." He paused, his gaze meeting those of some of the most powerful men in the city, his peers in the business world. True wealth isn't in stock market shares, in gold, or in Bitcoin. It's not in a positive balance of assets and liabilities. The greatest wealth we can possess is empathy, the ability to look at another person, especially a child, and protect them. And in that investment, I failed. The public confession, coming from a man known for his success and privacy, was deeply impactful. It wasn't just an accusation against Caroline. It was a self-accusation, an admission of his own blindness, which made his message all the more powerful and authentic. "But you can always start over," he continued, his tone gaining a note of hope. "Inspired by these drawings, by my daughter's ability to dream of a world where help flies to those in need, I am choosing tonight to turn pain into purpose." He took a deep breath. "It is with great emotion that I announce this evening the creation of the Wings of Bread Institute." A murmur went through the hall, this time not of shock, but of admiration. A foundation dedicated to supporting and giving a voice to children in vulnerable situations. Funded with a significant portion of my personal capital, because no profit, no dividend, no compound interest can compare to the value of a safe and happy childhood. He then turned and looked directly at Caroline, who remained motionless, her face a mask of humiliation. Their eyes met across the hall. There was no hatred in William's eyes, only a final, irrevocable resolution. "And finally," he said, his voice firm, but without histrionics, "I'm announcing that my marriage ends here, not with shouting or accusations, but with the truth. A truth that, for too long, I refused to see." The declaration fell like a final sentence. Caroline had no way to react. There were no more arguments, no more room for manipulation. She was exposed, judged, and condemned by the court of public opinion she so cherished. Slowly, as if moving underwater, she turned. The shimmer of her red dress now seemed dull, almost somber. Under the weight of dozens of hard, silent stares, she walked toward the exit. Each step was an eternity. The sound of her heels on the marble floor was the only thing heard in the hall. The woman who had entered as the radiant hostess, the queen of the night, left as a pariah, stripped of her crown of appearances. The door closed behind her, and it was as if a long, suffocating storm had finally passed. William remained on the stage for another moment, his heart heavy but strangely at peace. He felt no triumph, only the profound relief of having done the right thing. In the days to follow, the story would spread like wildfire. The local press would be torn between astonishment at the high society scandal and admiration for a father's courageous act. The creation of the Wings of Bread Institute would be the main headline, inspiring other families to break the silence about abuse hidden behind closed doors. But for William, the real victory wasn't in the society columns or public admiration. It was waiting for him at home. The house felt different when William returned. The silence that greeted him was not the same tense, oppressive silence of the past days. It was a clean, light stillness, like the air after a heavy rain that washes away the dust and leaves everything smelling of wet earth. The lights were low, and Maria was waiting for him in the foyer. Her eyes red, but with a smile that radiated immense relief. "She's gone, Mr. Miller," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "She packed a bag and left right after you called. Didn't say a word." William just nodded, a huge weight lifting from his shoulders. He wouldn't have to face another confrontation, another scene of manipulation. The Caroline chapter was, finally, closed. "And Clara?" he asked, the only thing that truly mattered. "She's asleep. I gave her a glass of warm milk and sang her the lullaby her mother used to sing. She went out like a light," Maria answered, a maternal affection in her voice. William felt a wave of gratitude for this woman, his loyal and courageous ally. She had been his daughter's silent guardian when he had been absent. William climbed the stairs, each step feeling lighter than the last. He opened the door to Clara's room with infinite care. The light from a small, star-shaped nightlight cast a soft glow on the girl's serene face. She was sleeping deeply, one hand clutching the rag doll with red yarn hair. He approached and sat on the edge of the bed, his heart overflowing with a love so intense it ached. He watched her breathe, her chest rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm. The marks of anguish seemed to have vanished from her face in her sleep. In that moment, he made a silent promise. No business meeting, no inheritance negotiation, no concern about the profitability of his investments would ever be more important than being present, than ensuring that this peaceful sleep was never again disturbed by cruelty or fear. He finally understood that his greatest asset wasn't listed on the stock exchange, but was sleeping peacefully in this room. The next morning, William woke before sunrise. He didn't feel tired, but energized, as if a 200-pound weight had been lifted from his back. He went to the kitchen, the same kitchen that had been the stage for so much pain, and felt that the air there had changed too. He opened the windows, letting the cool morning breeze come in and carry away the last traces of Caroline's toxic atmosphere. He made breakfast himself, with a care and attention he hadn't dedicated to domestic tasks in a long time. He made pancakes, cut fresh fruit, and squeezed orange juice, and with special care, he placed the freshest, most fragrant bread rolls he could find in a basket. When everything was ready, he went to Clara's room and woke her with a gentle whisper. She opened her eyes, sleepy, and seeing him smile, a small, shy smile bloomed on her lips. He picked her up, feeling the warmth of her small body against his, and carried her to the kitchen. "Look what I made for us," he said, placing her in her chair. Clara's eyes widened at the sight of the bountiful table. There was a hesitation in her gaze, a remnant of conditioned fear. William noticed, and his heart clenched. He took the plate of bread, placed it right in the center of the table, within everyone's reach, and said in the kindest voice he could find, "Today, the bread is ours, all of it." Clara looked at her father, her large brown eyes searching his face for any sign that contradicted his words. She saw the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, but she also saw something new, something she hadn't seen in a very long time. An open sincerity, a light that seemed to come from within. The hesitation was still there, a shadow of learned fear. But curiosity and a small seed of trust began to sprout. She looked at the bread, golden and inviting, and then back at him in a silent dialogue. William understood the unasked question in her eyes. The question was, is this safe? Is this real? He didn't use any more words. Instead, he took the largest piece of bread, the one still releasing a wisp of steam, and with his hands, which normally signed multi-million-dollar contracts, he broke it in two. The sound of the bread tearing was soft, comforting, the exact opposite of the dull thud the girl had seared into her memory. He offered one of the halves to her. "This is yours," he said. Then, holding the other half to his chest, he looked into her eyes, and the entire world seemed to shrink to the space between them. "And you walk right here," he said, tapping his own chest with the hand holding the bread. "This is where we really walk, with our hearts." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a revelation. He wasn't just giving her food. He was redefining her world, turning what Caroline had used as a weapon of humiliation into a symbol of inner strength. For the first time in a very, very long time, Clara smiled, a genuine smile that started on her lips and traveled all the way to her eyes, making them shine with tears that were not of sadness, but of a relief so profound it seemed to wash her soul. She took her half of the bread and took a small bite, the taste of freedom and fatherly love finally overpowering the bitter taste of fear. In that moment, William felt he was not just a father, he was a shelter, and he would rebuild this home, piece by piece, with the mortar of presence and affection. The days that followed were ones of a healing calm. The house, once a mausoleum of appearances, began to breathe again. The sound of Clara's laughter, at first shy and sporadic, became more frequent, echoing through the halls like a long-forgotten melody. William rearranged his entire business schedule. Meetings were cancelled, trips postponed. His priority was now different. He spent afternoons on the playroom floor, building castles with blocks, and nights reading her stories until she fell asleep. They were small, everyday moments, but they represented the recovery of a priceless treasure. time. One afternoon, he called Maria into his office. The woman entered, still with the humble posture of an employee, but he invited her to sit in the chair across from his desk. "Maria, there are no words or financial bonuses that can repay your loyalty and your courage," he began. "You protected Clara when I wasn't here to do it. You are more than an employee. You are part of this family." He offered her a new position as the head housekeeper, with a salary that left her speechless, and more importantly, with the promise that she would always be treated with the respect and dignity she deserved. Maria's tears of gratitude sealed the pact of a new family structure, one built on trust and kindness. While domestic life found its new, happy rhythm, the outside world reacted. The Wings of Bread Institute was born in the spotlight, but it quickly proved to be more than a public relations gesture. William dove into the project with the same dedication he once applied to his portfolio, transforming it into a serious and impactful organization. Donations began to pour in, from business leaders inspired by his actions and from ordinary people touched by the story. The Institute's official registered logo was Clara's drawing, the bread with wings, a symbol that now represented hope for hundreds of other children. One evening, as he was tucking Clara into bed, she hugged him tight. "Daddy," she whispered in his ear, her voice sleepy. "You know what I discovered?" He settled her into the pillows. "What, my princess?" She looked at the soft light of the star-shaped nightlight, and then at him, her eyes shining with a newfound wisdom. "The house has sunshine on the inside now." The simple sentence hit him with the force of an epiphany. The real light didn't come from the windows, but from the peace they had finally found. A year passed. The light streaming through the large hall's windows wasn't the cold architectural light that once illuminated the marble kitchen, but a warm, welcoming sun that seemed to dance in the air along with the laughter of children. The place smelled of fresh paint, chocolate cake, and, of course, warm bread. Today was the official opening of the headquarters for the Wings of Bread Institute. The hall wasn't filled with multi-millionaires in black tie attire, but with families, therapists, volunteers, and most importantly, children of all kinds who ran, played, and filled the space with a vibrant, chaotic energy. William leaned against a wall, away from the microphones and the flashes of the few journalists present. He wasn't wearing an expensive tuxedo, but a simple shirt, and on his face was a serenity that no successful stock market transaction had ever given him. He watched the scene, his heart filled with a kind of profit that couldn't be measured in dollars. This was his true net worth, his legacy. Real wealth wasn't in a bank vault, but in the sound of that laughter. His eyes found Clara. Now 6, she was no longer the girl hunched in a corner. She ran through the hall with a newfound confidence, her brown hair flying, her cheeks flushed. She no longer limped with fear, but skipped with joy. In a corner, William noticed a newly arrived boy who wore an orthopedic brace on one leg. He was sitting alone, watching the other children with a shy, wistful look, clinging to his mother's hand. William felt a pang in his heart, a painful memory of his own daughter's isolation. He took a step toward the boy, thinking of how he could welcome him, but he stopped. Clara had already seen him. She stopped running, tilted her head, and watched the boy for a moment. Then, with the resolve that seemed to come from the depths of her soul, she turned and marched to the large snack table. She picked up not one, but 2 sweet rolls, one in each hand. With the care of someone carrying something precious, she walked over to the boy. She crouched in front of him. He looked up, surprised. Clara held out one of her hands. "Want one?" she offered with disarming simplicity. "Sometimes legs get tired, right? But hunger doesn't." William watched the scene, his eyes filling with tears. It was the most powerful moment of transformation he could have ever dreamed of. His daughter wasn't just healed. She had become the healer. She had taken the deepest pain she had ever felt and transformed it into the purest empathy. That gesture, that simple act of sharing bread, was the greatest dividend of his life, the return on an investment made with the heart. The boy took the bread, a shy smile appearing on his face. Within minutes, the two were sitting on the floor, eating together, speaking in the universal language of children. Later, as the event began to wind down, Clara ran into her father's arms. "Daddy, today the sunshine is inside everyone," she said, snuggling into his chest. William hugged her tight, the scent of her hair mingling with the smell of bread. He looked at the large logo on the wall, the childish drawing of a bread with wings. The journey had been long and painful, but it had led them here, from the darkness of a cold kitchen to the light of a greater purpose. True strength, he finally understood, wasn't about outperforming others in business or accumulating assets. It was about getting on your knees to offer a hand. It was in knowing that, in the end, bread, just like love, is only worth anything when it's shared.